So we're learning Parashas Korach, going through the Torah, and we're learning the Sidra, the weekly section that's dealing with the rebellion of Korach, and really raises an enormous issue that impacts everyday life all the time, and that is the paradigm of machlokas, of strife, debate, all that comes with that. So the story is it's expressing, it's in Perek, it runs in the chapters from Tes Zayin, Yud Zayin, from 16, 17, all the way through. Really, the Sidra of Korach goes all the way through 16, 17, and 18, the three chapters, three prokim of Bamidbar, and it centers around the rebellion of Korach. Now, the rebellion of Korach is seen as the paradigm of machlokas, of as I said, strife and debate, this type of stuff that we're so deadly familiar with, right? It tears apart families, it tears apart communities, tears apart nations and the world. And you'd say, right, so don't have machlokas, right? Avoid this, run away from it, which is good advice in life. Just run away from this stuff if it ever strikes. And in fact, the Medrash, the ancient rabbinic writings, which Rashi quotes on the Sidra, says you can see kamakosha machlokas, how horrific is this kind of stuff, because normally speaking, punishments are, there's legal ages of responsibility for punishment, but in Korach's case, the community, they're killed in even children, right? The families that end up in the earthquake. That's how horrific machlokas is. And yet we find something shocking, which it's not so shocking actually if we think about it, which is of course the Mishnah in Perkei Avos, right? The great ancient rabbinical ethical teachings. The Kol Machlokas Shila Shem Shamayim Sofer L'Skayim. There is called an argument for the sake of heaven. And we're familiar, the whole of Gemara, the whole of Talmud, Mishnah, the whole oral Torah is debate and argument. In fact, on the contrary, the way court cases were meant to be done in the Sanhedrin and the way that Torah was meant to be decided was through arguing it out and coming out with a conclusion. And so, and we say, should either have a study partner or rather die, and part of the point is to argue things out. So what is good, what is bad? And the Mishnah says, Kol machlokas shila shem shamayim sofer l'skayim. What any argument that is for the sake of heaven, it will last. Which doesn't sound very good. You don't want an argument, you want it to be resolved. If it's not for the sake of heaven, ein sofer l'skayim. It's not going to last. So you think, okay, that's important because we may get into all sorts of arguments, right? Political, a company or organization or a yeshiva or who knows what, where there's an internal struggle. How do you know if it's l'shem shamayim, if it's for the sake of heaven? How do you know if it's not? And by the way, Midrashim actually go all the way and link these machlokas, these arguments to right at the beginning of creation itself. You got in the second day of creation, where God creates a rakia, creates a separation of heaven and earth. So you've actually got different midrashim that say that on the one hand, Hillel and Shammai, the two great schools of Torah thought are created there. And that's in fact what the Mishnah in Avos says. Ezi l'shem shamayim. What is a shem shamayim? How do you know if it's for the sake of heaven? Because it's Hillel and Shammai. That's the one that's for the sake of heaven, which doesn't seem to help us. And the same Midrashim say the other thing created when the separation of heaven and earth is Korach, is the horrific debate that tears apart the Jewish people. So they have the same root. As heaven and earth are divided, you can have the most beautiful. What's a machlokas shila shem shamayim? That's for the sake of heaven. Hillel and Shammai. Try and be like them. What's a machlokas shila shem shamayim? Korach chaladosei. They're all created as heaven and earth are separated. So the good and the bad. So how do we know which one we're in? We're fighting over an organization because we're right and they're wrong, and they're deciding to split off and do their own thing, and no, they're doing it their way and they're not listening to others. You can get into all the standard. Everyone can have an argument where we're right, they're wrong, and inheritance falls in a family. It can rip itself to pieces over this stuff. There's so many ways, and how do we know when but everyone's convinced I'm fighting for the truth. I am doing this for the sake of heaven. I'm doing the right thing. They are completely wrong. This is different, right? This is, and the Mishnah doesn't, right, saying sofer l'skayim, it will last in the future. See, if we could travel in time and go to the future, that would help us. But how do we know in the present where we are? Just saying Hillel and Shammai and Korach, how does that help us? And the answer is it does. Because elsewhere the rabbis give us a lot of information about this. And this is really, and ultimately it will come down to the nature of the way things are written into the Sidra itself, into Korach itself. We'll see if we have a lot of time for this. But Hillel and Shammai, so we know the Gemara in Eruvin tells us that for many years, this is the schools of Hillel and the school of Shammai argue, right? And Yotza Baskal, until a heavenly echo comes out and says, Eilu ve'elu divrei Elokim chaim, these and these are the words of the living God. And this is an issue that anyone very familiar with Talmudic law will be, these and these are the words of the living God. It sometimes sounds enigmatic, and some of you will have heard explanations of it. I want to recap a very important one together, but these and these are both the words of the living God. Okay, so if somehow, but what does that mean? I mean, does God say it's allowed or not allowed? It's pure or it's impure? How can they both be the word of the living God? But the law follows Hillel, the school of Hillel. One sec, if they're both the words of the living God, why should the law follow Hillel? Says the Gemara, because what was Hillel's grade? I mean, elsewhere we find that Shammai were the sharper scholars or the more brilliant ones. What gave Hillel? Hillel had special attributes. They were humble, right? They had humility. Okay, nice. So we give them the Midas prize, the prize for good behavior, good attributes. We should emulate them, but law should follow truth. What does God want? How do you read the verse correctly? What is the correct law? Not only did they have humility, they would be shonim divreim and divrei Shammai. They would also, if you came to them with a question and said, what's the law? They would say, okay, we think it's okay, but you should know that Shammai scholars think it's forbidden. Not only that, says the Gemara, they would teach Shammai's words before their own. So they would say, you've come to us with a question. Before we answer, you should know that the school of Shammai holds it's forbidden. We think it's okay, right? Okay, so again, very nice. They're great people. What's that got to do with the law following them? And how can both these be like the living God? And how can we know whether it's their argument or that one? And the key to all of this, and this is really based on a Ritva quoting the Tosfos, see it in the Maharad as well. Eilu ve'elu, these and these are the words of the living God. One way to think about it is like this. Suppose you've got a light. In fact, the Gemara itself says this elsewhere. It says, what did Moshe come down the Torah with? There were some things that are clear-cut. The Torah says, don't eat pork. The Torah says, don't work on Shabbat. Certain things are clear-cut. Certain things are not clear-cut. And that's where it requires interpretation. And he came down with 49 ponim faces, literally, of purity and 49 of impurity. 49 of permission, 49 of forbiddenness. In other words, sometimes areas are complex. So imagine a light shining into a prism. And as it goes through the prism, it refracts. And on the other side, what comes out is different rays of light. You've got the red, right, and the orange and the yellow, and all the way through the green and the blue, the violet. And now imagine you're only on the second side, so you can only see an array of colours. You can't see the full light shining on the inside. And now imagine you're so small that you cannot live in the ray of red and blue. You live in... Right? So now what colour is it? Well, it depends where you're standing. Nobody's big enough to see the whole picture. Some will see the red, some will see the blue, some will see the orange. What's the real truth on the other side? It's all of them as one. Right? If you can't get that there's red and blue and yellow and green, and then think there's a higher dimension where it all becomes one, then you haven't understood the issue at hand. But how should you practically live? Well, it depends where you are, right? If you're in the red light, treat it as if it's red, because for all practical purposes, your relationship with it is going to be with the red light. If red light was bad for you, then avoid that area. If blue light's good, go there. So it depends where you stand. So too, the light of God shines into the world. In certain laws, it's black and white. This is, you should do, you should give charity, right? You shouldn't steal, okay? You should wear tzitzis, certain clothing a religious Jewish man's men wear, if they've got a four-cornered garment. And you're not meant to wear shatnez. You can't put wool and linen into your clothing. Okay, fine. Certain things are clear-cut, right? You know what to do. But certain things are not clear-cut. They're complex. The light shines into the world and refracts. And in fact, the Rambam brings that the law could change in every generation. You have a Sanhedrin, you have the what used to be called in the Torah, the elders, the Zakenim, or the Shoftim, the judges, and they could decide differently in each generation. Why? Because they could interpret the Torah differently. Because, as it were, if the people in this generation are living with the red light, treat it as red. The forbidden light, treat it as forbidden. If they're more, the next generation, the souls, if you like, are more oriented towards the permitted light, then for them it's permitted. Of course, the nation has to function as one, so its scholars will be equally diverse across the light spectrum, but they will represent the people and the 70 faces of Torah that we speak about, right? Which is why you have to have 70 judges on the Supreme Court. Each of the faces, but in the end they represent the people, and where they are in one generation may differ from another, and the Torah can be flexible in where the people are relative to the light itself. The point is that nobody should think the bit of light they see is the whole picture. That's why the Gemara says, Elu ve'elu, these and these are the words of the living God. Why does the law follow Hillel? Because they were so sensitive to this understanding, their humility and their recognition that what we see is only a piece of the picture. To see the full picture, you need the other side. The more sensitive you are to that, the more you merit to represent the people, and the law should follow you. By the way, in Hillel and Shammai's case particularly, there's a very beautiful piece by Rav Zevin, and many others as well. He just puts it in a particular way, that if you look throughout Shas, throughout the Gemara, throughout Mishnah, all the halachic debates in Hillel and Shammai, you see a pattern. Generally, people say if they don't know better, and even if they do know better, Shammai are usually the strict ones, Hillel are usually the lenient ones. And that's a pretty good guide. That's 80% of the case that may well be true, but first of all, there's exceptions. There's a whole chapter of all in ADS the other way around, where Hillel are strict and Shammai are lenient. But there's also lots of arguments that have nothing to do with being strict or lenient. Some about interpretation of Torah, some about rabbinic law, some about customs, and they have nothing to do with who's strict or lenient. So a very famous example is Hanukkah. Right? On Hanukkah, by halacha, by law, you only have to light one light each night. But Mahadran, everyone wants to bring beauty, we change the number every night. So Hillel's way of doing, which what we do, is you light one on the first night, then you light 2 on the second, 3 on the third, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Shammai's approach is the opposite. They follow the way that the offerings work in the Sukkot festival. They go down. They start with 8 and then go to 7 and 6 and 5 and 4 and 3 and 2 and 1. So you think, okay, but that's got nothing to do with who's strict or lenient. Lots of other examples. I think another example he brings there is Havdalah, the separation that we make, the bracha that we make on the separation at the end of Shabbos. We say Barim Ma'ar Ha'ish, we light a fire and we say, or light a double flame, and we say, blessed is God who makes the light of fire. Singular, light. Shammai say lights, plural. You think, what's that about? There's many others like it. So this is what I spoke about my bar mitzvah. My father in my bar mitzvah, Josh, and it was a beautiful piece from Rav Zevin. And Rav Dessler writes it differently and others write it differently, but this is so clear, it's so beautiful. Shammai always look at the potential of things. Other sources quote the idea of Shammai soid shamayim. Shammai, the word itself, is like shamayim, like heaven. They look at things from the perspective of heaven, or the way Rav Zevin says it, they look at things from the perspective of their potential. Hillel don't look at that. They look at the way things actually are and come out in the world. So that's usually the potential of something is stricter, more demanding than its actualization. Occasionally the other way around. But think about the Hanukkah example. Right, so you got a jug of oil. The Kohanim, the priest, found on the first night a jar of oil. It was supposed to last for one night. On that first night, there was a decree in heaven to give this jug the potential, this oil, to last for 8 days. Now, on the second day, it had already lit for a day. So now in heaven, what are they declaring? What is the potential that is given? 7 days. 6 days, 5. So Shammai said that's how you light. On the first day you light 8 because this jar's given 8 days. Its potential is 8. The next day its potential is 7. Its potential is 6. Its potential goes down till the last night it's given one more night to light, and that's how it lights. Hillel don't look at the perspective of potential. What's actually come out in the world, what's been revealed in the world on the first night is it's lit for a night and it's still there. A miracle of being lit a whole night and it's still there. Second, it's now lit for 2 nights and it's still there, this oil that was supposed to last 1. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They're not looking at the potential up in heaven. They're looking at how it comes out and praises God on earth. Of course, the very name Hillel is Hallel, is the praise of God on earth. That's how they're looking at the world. So that's their perspectives. And they run through all their arguments, all the halachas throughout Shas. And even their behavior differences. The Gemara tells us that on the beginning of the week, Shammai would go to the market and buy the food for Shabbos because they looked, what's the greatest potential in this food to use it for Shabbos? Only later in the week, if they found anything better, would they eat the first one and save the second one. Hillel would go each day and buy today's food. We're in the actual world. We need to look at things by their potential. Today we'll eat lunch today. We'll worry about Shabbos, Nira Shabbos. Everything. So, Borei Ma'or, think about that. For Shammai, right? Sorry, I said it wrong. I think Hillel says Borei Ma'or Ha'ish singular, light of fire. Sorry, Hillel says Borei Ma'orei Ha'ish plural. I apologize. That's if I said it wrongly, I've got it in my head now. That whatever I said before, when it comes to Havdalah, Shammai say Borei Ma'or Ha'ish singular. Blessed is the light of fire singular, because Shammai is looking at what was the potential. God created the potential for light. Hillel says, like we say, Borei Ma'orei Ha'ish. Blessed God who made the lights plural of fire, right? Because actually in this world, they all come out as separate light. So that's always what's going on. Shammai looks at the potential, Hillel looks at the actual. This is why there's a deep teaching, the Kedushas Levi brings it out, that in the future we'll all go like Shammai. Why? Because in the future, the potential and actual will all become the same. And our actual will become like our potential, and then the law will follow Shammai. And there's many other things to say. In laws of Shabbos, we often follow Shammai, because Shabbos, we're kind of living like the future. We're living the heavenly or the potential state of things. We don't turn potential into actual. We don't change things on Shabbos. Anyway, more of that. But the point is getting back to Eluv Eluv. So they're both the words of the living God, because to see the picture, you need the light that shines at its potential and the light that shines in its actual. And as you run through Shas, you can see this with all the great rabbis, Rav Yehuda and Rav Shimon, as an example. Rav Shimon is always interested in the intention or the inner dimension of things. Rav Yehuda is interested in the action. So, for example, in the laws of Shabbos, a davar she'ein miskavin, an action done that is forbidden, but that wasn't intended, right? So Rav Shimon will say that's okay. Rav Yehuda will say, no, it's not okay, right? And many other examples like this. Even when they have a discussion about the Roman Empire, Rav Yehuda will say, look how amazing the actions are, look what they've built, the Romans. And Rav Shimon will say, yeah, but what were their intentions? Right? And this you could track through each perspective, each Tana, each Amoira, each of the rabbis. They're different rays of light that run through all the halachic, or most of the halachic arguments. Right? And we're not going to go through all of them here now, right? Or even too many more examples, but that's the point. So that's what it means. You don't have the picture unless you have both. Of course, you need the potential and the actual. Now, you can only decide the halacha like one. You can only practically say it's forbidden or permitted. You like 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But you need to see both sides to fully appreciate the depth behind the issue. And this is why in Talmud we never just reject the rejected view. We still study it. We still learn it. You know, the greatest story of all like this in the Gemara is Rish Lakish and Rav Yochanan, right? The story in Bava Metzia, the was really tragic story, but the tragic story where the story begins as we know that, I mean, I don't know, I should say as we know. The story begins that Rish Lakish was a gangster. He was a criminal who saw Rav Yochanan was the great rabbi of the time. He'd had a very tragic life, but at the same time he was the great scholar, and he had a certain beauty, a physical or spiritual beauty. And Rish Lakish jumps across to raid him and he sees the beauty of Rav Yochanan and says, wow, you know, and Rav Yochanan sees the strength of Rish Lakish and says, you know, we Jewish people, we need you to be dedicating that same energy to Torah. You could change our nation. And he says, Rav Yochanan, your beauty, wow. I mean, and they come up with a deal. They essentially say, we recognize the tremendous spiritual and physical and every power within both of them. How about we make a pact? Rish Lakish dedicates his life to Torah. And the hope was that Rav Yochanan's sister will agree to marry him, and in fact that's exactly what happens. He ends up dedicating his life to Torah, he ends up marrying into the family, everyone's happy, and he becomes this super giant of Torah learning, and they become, Rav Yochanan's the teacher, but Rish Lakish is like somewhat a student, but somewhat a learning partner, until one day they have a horrific argument. Each one feels hurt and offended, and in Rav Yochanan's pain, Rish Lakish, like from heaven they decree, and Rish Lakish is taken from the world. And Rav Yochanan is bereft. He's distraught without Rish Lakish. He's gone, no one is equal, no one is match in study of Torah. And he feels empty and lost. And the rabbis send, already from Babylon, they'd sent over, Rabbi Elazar ben Pados had arrived in Israel. He was this prodigy and this super scholar. And they decided, you know what, you go and learn with Rav Yochanan. Your Rish Lakish's replacement. And Rav Yochanan opens his mouth at the beginning of the teaching, and Rav Elazar, in his brilliance, is backing up everything he says with proofs, and I can bring a source for the idea and a logical derivation of your idea, and I can back it up in 100 ways. And everyone finished. Well, everyone's there in awe. Wow, this is perfect. Everything Rav Yochanan said, he could add depth to it. Rav Yochanan's crying. He says, I don't need someone to show me why I'm right. Where is Rish Lakish? I open my mouth, he's got 24 questions against me. Why? But you want your support, right? In an argument, you want to be proven right. No, not if you're for real. Not if you're trying to understand the word of God and you realize no matter how great the human brain is, no one brain can grasp the whole picture. I don't need to know why what I see is true. I know that already. I need to know what I don't see. I need to know what's wrong with what I see. I need to know the other side. And he was in so much pain that no one could console him. And the rabbis in the end have to pray for mercy, not even for his well-being, just for God to give him mercy, and he's taken out of the world. I can't live if all I can see is what I see, because I can't live if you cannot show me what's greater than what I can see. How can I live trapped in my own mind when the mind of God pumped into the world, the light of God is so much greater? If I have no access to what I don't see, then I cannot live. And so as my teacher of Berkowitz said, you've got to fight for truth fiercely. I want to see and argue it out and really try to knock out the other view and test it until it, the Talmud will reject lots and lots of views, but until we're left with those that pass the test. And then when I cannot understand the other perspective, and I'll still rule according to mine, right? If I was a great enough rabbi to rule, I need to recognize the truth is bigger than me. And that's what the Mishnah says in Yevamos, and Daf Yud Gimel 13, says that Hillel and Shammai, even though they argued fiercely about what's allowed and not allowed, and even what marriages are allowed, they didn't stop marrying each other into each other's families. They didn't stop eating each other's food. And the Gemara explains that it's not that they gave up on their view, is they would keep plates and keep records so that they could confidently say, look, you can't marry this person because according to you it's a forbidden marriage, but everybody else we can marry. You can't eat from this plate, but I've got a cupboard, of the plates that are suitable for you so that we could eat together. Why? L'kayim Hashanema, in order to fulfill the pasuk, ha'emes ha'shalom ehavu. They love truth and peace. Yes, they love truth, but they also love peace. And on a deep level, I heard from Rabbi Weinberg, in a certain sense, it's not just peace you get when you're both together, it's also truth. The deeper truth. So that's the machlokes shel Hashem Shamayim, when you desperately want the other side. When you recognize no matter how sure you are you're right. If the other side of genuine people are trying to do what's true, let's say within Torah, they accept the Torah as God, they're doing their best to understand it, then the chances are, unless you can totally disprove, the chances are just because you've got good arguments, they've also got good arguments, the chances are even though only one side makes sense to you, recognize the truth is bigger than you. Then machlokes from the word chelek, we're each a piece of an integrated puzzle. Korach, he thought he was right too. That the Medrash Tanchuma, which Rashi brings, he had a vision and a prophecy even, that he knew the great Shmuel is going to come out of him, Samuel the prophet. He knew his descendants. So if he knows he's going to be there in the future, he's sure he's right. Being sure you're right and being sure you're arguing over God's will, that's not enough to be L'Shem Shamayim for the sake of heaven. Because Korach was not for the sake of heaven. Because the opening word is Vayikach Korach ben Yitzhak. Korach, son of Yitzhak, son of Kos, son of Levi, took. Doesn't say what he took. V'Dosan v'Aviram and Dosan v'Aviram presumably took. V'Oim ben Peres b'nei Reuven, they took. It doesn't say what they took, which means they took themselves. Rashi brings the Medrash. They took themselves to a side to argue. They wanted their side to be right, and they did not want the other side to be there. If you want the other side to be gone, know for sure that you're in a machlokes that is not for the sake of heaven. It's for the sake of yourself. No matter how right you seem, no matter how true everything seems to you, no matter how clear, this is not. You're in a machlokes shelo l'shem shamayim, a machlokes that is not for the sake of heaven, that will not last, that will not make it. And chances are you feel angry, chances are you feel pain, chances are you feel hurt, chances are you feel fear, chances are you feel pride, chances are all the negative drives. And then you justify them because in the big picture the other one's wrong. Even if you're right, you're wrong. It's when you're desperately able to clear all that out and put the ego aside and listen and say, God, what do you want? And we'll always hear the answer. I want peace. I want you, but I want the other side. Together you build the whole picture. Learn to see the world from the other side's perspective, because if you can't, then you're always wrong. And that is a powerful lesson. So much more to say, but I think for this right now, this is what we have time for, and hopefully it's of deep value. And Hashem should help each one of us to always realize we're a piece of the puzzle, and to realize that when we're in an argument, the other person didn't wake up in the morning and say, I want to be evil. If they're being obnoxious and horrible, there are abusive and terrible people in the world we just need to cut off from to save our own sanity. But for the most part, whether it's an argument in a marriage, a dispute in a family about inheritance, a dispute in an organization about the political structures or a community, wherever it is, the chances are that the extent to which we feel we're right and they're wrong, we're at least a part of the problem. Unless we can get into seeing the world from their side. What does it look like from their side? No, I don't agree with them, but can I understand the world from their point of view? If I can't, I'm out. Chances are very, very low that I'm in the right over here. Right? The chance are usually is two sides. And this one's the exception. They're evil, they're terrible. Okay, we know that. Anyone who's learned the Garden of Eden story knows that's how the serpent, that's how the Nachash gets us to think. But to really be for the sake of heaven, we need to try to really hard to get to the point of understanding their side. And when we can, it will tend to look very different. And if we can't, so our job should be to bring shalom, to bring peace to the world. It's worth it. There's no amount of money worth tearing a family apart. Let them be wrong. Let's keep us all together. There's no amount of money that someone will come and say, can we divide your community, your organization? And all the good that will get produced will be worth very, very little. But when we can step aside from that, and step into this world of, I'm sure I'm right, but let's sacrifice it for the greater good, let's make sure whatever happens we stay together, then we bring all the brachos and shalom into the world. Hashem shall help us bring all the brachos and shalom into the world. A good Shabbos to everyone.